Girl, real talk. This whole "it's new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
Join me, 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty, on my podcast, My Life of Crime, as I take on true crime investigations like no other. This season, I'm looking into the labyrinth of crime and secrets within families. I'm cutting straight to the evidence and talking to the people directly involved, including investigators and the families of victims. Listen to My Life of Crime with Erin Moriarty wherever you get your podcasts.
A note to listeners: the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
My goal is to establish healthy boundaries that draw a very clear line in the sand that say, if you are going to make a victim, understand you're not going to hide behind an unfair timeline.
Every person that's come forward to this point that would have information is an addict. And because they're an addict, in the eyes of them, OSBI, they are not a credible source.
You've got to have a state representative and a senator there, and they are two good opportunities possibly to work with the governor.
To be quite honest, I feel like they, what's the word I'm looking for?
Sabotage.
They sabotaged the search. They sure did. That's the word.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
Today, we're joining forces of two extraordinary women who have incredible courage and are not afraid to speak truth to power.
We met Jenny Graham when we did a documentary on the Green River Killer a few years back, and Jenny is the sister of one of the many victims of Gary Ridgway. That documentary is called My Uncle is the Green River Killer, and it's available online.
Jenny's determination to find out what happened to her sister and hold those people accountable propelled her to become a state representative for the state of Washington, where she continues to fight for victims' rights every day.
We felt it was important for Paula to speak with Jenny because both of these women have gone through the fire dealing with the horrible crimes committed against their families.
We are also hoping Jenny can provide some direction on how to make Molly's case more visible to the political representatives in Oklahoma.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I was just finishing up a meeting.
No problem.
Violent crime, Lutheran Services over here handles a lot of crime victims.
Oh, that's
so I
nice.
was talking to them about the different legislation that's coming up and, helping the people that they're serving to understand what tools that they have available to them. Because when you get victimized, you're not in control.
Right.
Right. So it's another step to be hopefully helping them to pick these pieces of their life back up again.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's definitely needed because we talk to Paula about this all the time. Like, you guys are just left to kind of fend for yourselves.
Exactly. We have Paula on the phone right here now. Paula, why don't you say hello to Jenny?
Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Paula.
How are you?
Oh, I am literally working really hard.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
We've all been it's like a daily thing with us three. We're on the phone all day, every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just went through that with a couple of families over here in Washington trying to keep a mass murderer in prison that wasn't repentant in any way, shape, or form. And he's going to be the guy that's going to do this again.
Of course.
Based on what it is that I saw. So we were successful, put enough pressure on Governor Inslee. He revoked that parole. That was the smartest thing for him to do because we were coming after him with everything we had.
And you don't want Jenny Graham after you.
No.
That I know for real.
Yeah. Hey, hold on. For just to give people a little bit of context here, I mean, I want Cindy to kind of do a little intro about you, Jenny, about what you're about, and so go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, so 8 years ago, a while ago, Rob and I produced a documentary called "My Uncle is the Green River Killer," And I got in touch with Jenny because her sister was an actual victim of the Green River Killer. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, it is a case that happened in the 70s and 80s. It took 30 years to solve. And Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer who horrifically killed probably over 100 women. And unfortunately, Jenny's little sister was one of those victims. I still get emotional when I talk about this story because it was so amazing what this woman went through and where she's come, where she is now. So sorry.
That's so sweet.
It really is, Jenny. You are such an inspiration. I can't even tell you. So Jenny and I started talking about this, and it was really hard because no one was taking the case seriously because Jenny's sister was a runaway, or kind of a runaway. She was not your average college girl Ted Bundy victim who would be on the front page of the news. And it was really hard for her family, and they suffered for a very long time before they got any answers. And when I met Jenny, we were talking to the family of Gary Ridgway, and she was brave enough to confront that family and talk to that family about what their family member had done to her sister. And she wanted to have a sit down with Gary, and the state refused to allow it to happen. But she kept pushing and she kept pushing, and she got that meeting with Gary Ridgway, and she actually got to sit down with him and ask him the questions that she always wanted to ask him. And we honestly are just amazed at the things that Jenny has accomplished since then. She went on to become a congresswoman of the state of Washington, and she fights for victims' rights, and she's a force to be reckoned with. And we really wanted her to meet Paula because Paula is also a force to be reckoned with, and we really felt like these two women could really benefit from knowing each other.
Oh, well, that's very sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm actually a state representative.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Congresswoman would be nice. Kathy she might not like that though.
Okay.
Sorry, clarified. Let me clarify that. Jenny is actually a state representative for the state of Washington.
Yes. For Spokane's mighty 6th district.
Okay, Jenny. So just tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what that means. And since we last were dealing with Gary, when you actually went to go see him, and kind of pick up from there if you can.
Yeah, and then what we'll do is I think you can probably, Paula may have some questions for you, or we may have some questions for you, because we want to take this case to the state level at this point, and also the national level.
Right. So basically, this is number one, politics were not, they just were not on my radar. This was not something that I woke up every day and just decided that I wanted to do. I was actually running as far and as fast the other direction as I could go. However, when I was able to start looking into Debbie's death investigation files, and I found out there were some things in there that I didn't have access to, with it being a murder case, and we had the statutes of limitations where you had a year to report either child sexual assault or child pornography, any of that. What occurred to me is that children were not getting a fair hand in our justice system, because it didn't take long to keep a kid quiet for a year. It didn't take much. Threaten their life, threaten somebody they love, or just they get in a position of thinking this is what love is, when it's not. It's manipulation, and it's wrong. And so I decided that I was going to change that, because it just was not fair. And honestly, my goal was not to put people in jail. Even with the bills that I'm writing right now, my goal is not that. My goal is to establish healthy boundaries that draw a very clear line in the sand that say, if you are going to make a victim, understand you're not going to hide behind an unfair timeline. Those days are done. And we successfully did get that legislation passed. And unbeknownst to me, it was basically trial by fire, because then I spent the next 2 years working to meet with Gary Ridgway, trying to understand, because he was somebody's kid, somebody's child before he did this. And so I genuinely was turning over every stone, trying to understand all of the different points of view of this. And honestly, all of that work, without me even being aware of it, was preparing me for what I'm doing right now. And to be able to give me the unique voice that I have on that particular committee, to the point where I've actually had a couple of murderers that came in there. One was seeking, he wanted a pardon, and he didn't expect anybody to do homework on who this was. And it turns out that he got out on a technicality And I ended up having the file to read it. So I know exactly what he was guilty of. I know that he applied multiple times for clemency, and he kept getting turned down because they told him, you're guilty, sorry. So he came in there, and the way that I was seeing this was, in Olympia, we have lobbyists that come to lobby us about different issues. I have people coming in there all the time to lobby for lower criminal sentencing, to eliminate the death penalty, all of these things. Rarely do I get anybody coming in there for the victim's side. Rarely do we have that happen, and that has to change. So I'm working on that right now, because we can do better. We should do better. I believe in balance. Just like if a wrong it's about justice. That's where I'm at. Whether it's somebody that is a crime victim or somebody that's been wrongfully accused, we have to have balance. Otherwise, we don't have a justice system that functions well. And I think we have the best one in the world when I compare other ones. But anyway, I just, like I said, I've got a lot of bills that I'm working on to help at our state level. And some other states have some different ones out there too that we can look at to try to adjust to make things a little bit better for crime victims. And that way you don't have people coming in there like what I did, in the way that I knew the crimes that this guy committed because I read it. And he's sitting there acting like he's this sweet old man and he was wrongfully convicted and he could have been executed. When you read the files, you recognize that this man erased his victims as human beings. He erased them. And then he was coming into my committee to do it again by saying that he was the actual victim, that he was wrongfully convicted.
It's interesting
right?
because in Paula's situation, that's exactly what's happening. The people that we believe are responsible for Molly's disappearance act as if they're victims all the time. Paula, right?
Yes. I mean, they have actually put it out on Facebook because, to be quite honest, Facebook has been our friend. So therefore, we've put a lot of information out there. They have come back, trying to defend themselves, different ones that we've put out there, and they always play the victim. When in fact, we know without a doubt, they have either knowledge or directly involved.
Right. And I know taking on these issues is not easy. You're going to have a strong spine. You're going to have thick skin. You're going to have to set up a support. You need to set up family support, friend support, that type of thing, because it can be really tough. In my case, fighting what I was fighting with that, I had the majority party that was supporting this legislation. And I ended up getting copies of the file and highlighted it where they said there's no way DNA proved that he was innocent. They didn't have it. So, and I thought, God, I think this guy's not telling the truth, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because I don't have the file sitting right in front of me, right? But I went and highlighted it and I slapped it down on every one of their desks that this was a guilty man with no remorse. And they came back saying that they were looking at sanctioning me. Goodman is the chair for that committee. And he was so angry. The guy was just spitting nails. He said he wasn't going to let me testify on behalf of the Green River murder victims, right? Because there weren't a lot of other people there that were a voice for the people, the murder victims. They lose their voice. They lose their rights. So anyway, and I'm guaranteeing you, as mad as he was at me, it would not have come close to the anger that I felt towards him for disrespecting crime victims the way that I saw happening. We did go toe to toe. They said that they were going to look at possibly sanctioning me for breaking decorum, they said, because I called a murderer out. Go figure. I didn't let him get away with it, right? And I went home and I prayed about it because you're up early in the morning while it's dark and you're going home when it's dark. So I think I fell asleep with the Bible on my chest. And there was a message that came through. And I went back the next day and I told him, you do whatever it is you feel you need to do. Go right ahead. I have the proof right here. I know exactly what happened. There's video that's available. So you go right here and we will duke this out in the news.
Yeah.
So they backed off. They did. They backed off. And that same guy, you got to picture me sitting at a table with him, probably as close as Gary Ridgway and I were sitting. The only difference is there was glass between Gary and me, and there wasn't with this other guy. And I'm telling you, I was a freshman at that point, but he had his finger within an inch of my face, finger in my face, telling me, you do what I tell you to do.
Interesting.
So, Robin, Cindy, you just have to picture me sitting there in my pink flowery skirt and my heels and stuff, looking at this guy thinking to myself, boy, you really don't know me very well, do you? But you're about to find out.
Yeah, I can't. I wouldn't want to be on the other side of that finger.
No.
So Jenny, what would you suggest for Paula? Paula's kind of in a situation.
We gave you like a one sheet of like her case to kind of give you breakdown with a lot of the obstacles that she's going up against, and she has had obstacle after obstacle. Your case was like it was after Gary was convicted that all of your work happened. She's in the beginning phases of this because she's been the only true investigator on this case who's still working on it daily. We've been working with her like for the past couple of years daily on this, and she's getting no relief or any kind of feedback from all of the different law enforcement agencies, including going up to the FBI, OSBI, the local municipalities as well. And we just feel like there needs to be more visual political outreach here. And you being a state representative, we'd love to hear your feedback on how you think that Paula can use the system to help her get some answers.
Because it has been almost 10 years of Paula doing this on her own without really getting any help from anybody.
Well, the truth of the matter is I would have to I would have to completely go outside the state in order to get the help, because I think I've gone as high as I can in the state of Oklahoma, because I've gone to the AG's office. I've been in the AG's office 4 times. I've handed them binders, and Molly's favorite color is purple, and I intentionally put all the information in a purple binder, and I told with her picture on the front of it and told them, you will never lose this. So I feel like I've gone as far as I can here, it feels like, and I don't know where else to go.
So let me ask you a question. What is on the death certificate?
There's not a death certificate. She's missing.
She
has been declared deceased since January 13th of 2021. And so it's been a year and 6 months, basically, that she's been declared deceased. There is no death certificate. She is missing, along with another boy who is also missing.
Did they go missing at the same time?
Yes, they went missing together. They were in a high-speed chase with another individual. That individual was related to the sheriff of Love County, of the county where they went missing in. We know without a shadow of a doubt, with all the information that we've gathered, we know she was murdered. I even have eyewitness account that Robin Cindy could share with you if they like, the recording of the eyewitness account of what happened. And that all only came to light last year, this eyewitness account. And she initially contacted me last year, just a couple of months after Molly's grandfather died. And I believe that's the only reason he came forward with the information, because he had great respect for Molly's grandfather, but he was there when she was murdered. So I convinced him to talk to the FBI, which he did, and he gave his statement. And based on his information, the FBI told me, they called me back after he left their office and said, okay, based on this information, we are going to be writing a report and sending it over to the federal attorney general's office. And at the time, I already had a search scheduled for the location that he had told me. So they asked me to put off that search, which I did, but only for 3 extra days, because they would not tell me how long I needed to wait to do the search of the location this guy told me. The reasoning behind that was in the state of Oklahoma, we have the McGirt law that recently went into effect just within the last couple of years. And a lot of Native Americans are trying to get out of jail, out of prison on a technicality because of the McGirt law, and they're currently trying to keep these people in prison. So that was the reason behind the FBI. The field offices were all behind in there trying to reinvestigate cases. I did put it off, but I only put it off for 3 days after hearing from the OSBI, that's the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. and they called me because I never even contacted them with the information, because from my past experience, I knew that because this man was a drug addict, that they would not take him serious, because that's been the reasoning behind every person that's come forward to this point that would have information is an addict. And because they're an addict, in the eyes of the OSBI, they are not a credible source. So I did not go to the OSBI with this information. I went to FBI. OSBI was notified because they are the lead agency on the case. And so they were notified. They went to the jail and spoke to him several different times. And they also called me after they had spoke to him a couple of times. Honestly, it was a 3-hour phone call. When they called me, they had a lot of questions about what's been going on. They did ask if I was still planning on doing the search, and I told them I was. And so we did do the search with the help of Texas EquiSearch out of Houston. And they asked me if I minded if they came to the search. And I told them, I said, I can't keep you from coming. So they did. To be quite honest, I feel like they, what's the word I'm looking for?
Sabotage.
They sabotaged the search. They sure did. That's the word. Because based off the information the gentleman told me, we were searching a lake with the sonar equipment. And based off the information that I was told by the eyewitness, I knew what needed to be searched. But I was not on the boat. But the OSBI, one of the agents there, did get on the boat. And they told them a specific location that needed to be searched based off the eyewitness's account. And basically, they came from Illinois, the people with the boat, and they were in the water for maybe an hour and a half, and they were only doing as the OSBI told them to do. And I'm not putting any fault on the people running the boat, because these people are incredible. They've been here multiple times on my behalf, on Molly's behalf. They sabotaged the search. And to be quite honest, we're going to have to redo the search because of that.
Do you think that there's a possibility that the remains may have been moved?
Well, see, that is something that to be quite honest, the people involved, in her disappearance, we believe they've had ample opportunity to move them. You know, the sheriff of Love County, who was the cousin of the driver of the car, he was the sheriff up until November of 2016, at which point, because of Molly's case, the FBI did investigate the sheriff. The sheriff was charged with multiple things. He finally resigned after getting a slap on the wrist and a $300 fine for these felony charges. They dropped all the felony and just charged him with a misdemeanor. He got a $300 fine and a year's probation, I believe it was, for all the things. He was running a meth house out of his home.
Oh, no. Oh.
His adult son, was using his sheriff's vehicle to distribute meth and sell meth. There's testimony to that fact, and through the federal grand jury, we have that transcript. Robinson D has a copy of that. The sheriff was removed, but he was not. He was charged with felonies, but he was given a deal for whatever reason, I don't know. So between 2013, when Molly went missing, and 2016, when the sheriff actually resigned, there was plenty of opportunity during that time frame to do whatever they needed to do and have coverage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They had coverage. So
with the feds being involved, does this mean that she was taken over state lines?
No.
No, she's Native American.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is starting to click a little bit more now. Okay. Native American. Did she disappear on sovereign land, or did she disappear on state land? I'm trying to understand.
It was sovereign land.
Okay, so so it was a reservation.
It's Indian territory.
Indian territory. Okay,
yes.
Yeah, that is something that we've been dealing with in Washington State as well. The missing and murdered indigenous. I actually worked with our ranking member. I was a co-sponsor on that bill to help open up a path where tribal police work with local police when you have a missing case like that. And we were able to also put some money forward to help with like DNA testing, because they had quite a few remains that they didn't know who they belonged to. So doing the DNA testing really did help get these families
connect it again, get the remains back to their families. So that, you're right, there is a whole nother layer of that when you're dealing with Indigenous missing.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
so sorry.
it's a crazy case because you have a corrupt sheriff's department. He was in power for like 16 years, and we've seen the grand jury transcripts of the trial, and he had a criminal enterprise he was running as the sheriff there. You know, he was stealing cattle, he was pulling people over, he was robbing them, and like he was charging with something, and then he would have somebody come by and rob their car, and then purse out like jewelry and whatever it was in the car, he was giving it to family members. It was not to mention all the meth he was dealing with, and he was dealing with the drug dealers as well, and he was cooking meth at his house, distributing, and was dealing with young women, pulling them to their house and keeping him there. The fact that everybody in that county was afraid of him, because if you were on his wrong side, he'd figure out something to charge you with and put you away, and no one would be able to say anything. And the DA's office that is down there, I can't imagine that they weren't privy to what's going on. And we've heard rumors and reports from people we've been getting tips of that the local DA there is not above board and hasn't been for a while, and decides to prosecute cases that he feels that plays like kind of God in that county. And so you had Joe, and you had the DA, and then you had the family members, the cousins and everything, which were running a criminal enterprise too. And you have Molly and Colt, the two victims here, who just got caught in the middle of it. I mean, Colt was rightfully so. He was dealing drugs too, and he was using. Molly was an innocent bystander. She was using, and she was enamored with Colt. She was in that car at the wrong place at the wrong time. And then you have Con Nip, who is the cousin of the sheriff, who routinely take the local sheriff's deputies on high-speed pursuits through the backcountry because he knew he would get away. Nothing would happen to him.
Oh, yes, this was his MO. It was his MO to start a police chase with law enforcement, drive like a maniac, get back in there in the backwoods, and, they'd lose him. And they knew it was Con. They just let it go. But 9 times out of 10, the car that he was in was a stolen vehicle on top of the high-speed chase. And even after Molly and Colt went missing, there were 7 stolen cars found on their property. 7. No one was arrested. For the 7 stolen cars that were found on the property. It's just some shady things going on.
And then we can't get warrants. A warrant was just recently denied for the area where the car was ditched, and there was a burn pit about 700 yards from the car where cadaver dogs have alerted to blood pathogen, which we believe is where one of them was killed. Then there's the whole Nip property they can't get a warrant for either because they have to go through the DA, the local DA. He turned down the first warrant where the car was found because he didn't want the county to get sued for them to disturbing the earth. It's a farm. It's a field. So it's like there's all these roadblocks that Paula has been dealing with for the past 9 years. And we feel like we're at a point now, and we've put all of this stuff on the podcast, all the recordings that made with eyewitnesses, and people saw Molly before she disappeared. But the people that we can't talk to are the potential suspects, because they all lawyered up. Some of them, now they're all dispersing. And we're getting tips. Since we've been doing the podcast, we've been getting a lot of tips. And some of the tips are telling us where the remains may be.
So let me ask a question. What is the trafficking situation there with them doing drugs and everything? Were you aware of any sort of trafficking involved?
Trafficking, like human trafficking? Or drug trafficking?
Sex trafficking?
Sex trafficking.
Well, that was always a possibility. And that was something that was brought up at one point that could have been a possibility. But mainly that was coming from the people involved that was putting that information out there. I do not believe that is the case here because Molly and Colt were left in the woods after the police chase that night. They were out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally nowhere. In the woods, about, I think, approximately a mile as a crow flies from Con Nip's home where he lived with his grandparents.
Okay.
They were left out there. This particular night, there was not even a moon. And it's in the middle of July, July the 8th. the night of the 7th into the 8th, and they were making phone calls all night long, trying to get somebody to help them come and get them. Long story short, Molly's phone, the last call she made was that she actually spoke to someone, was at 9:33 a.m. the morning of the 8th, which was a Monday morning. Her phone went dead at 9:39. No other calls, outgoing calls were made from her phone after 9:39, where she attempted to make a phone call, but no one answered. Colt's phone, his phone completely went dead. No more calls made from his phone after 9:57 a.m. Within 20 minutes of each other, the phones went dead and no other calls were made. And this was right after 4 people had gone to Con's house asking, where are they? Con was the only one who knew where they were. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a legion of information.
Much.
What we're trying to figure out is right now, because we're putting out all this information on the podcast, we're bringing in experts. We had polygraph analysis person listen to the recording that Paula did with the eyewitness that she did, where she tracked this guy down in the woods and didn't know he was being recorded and spilled the beans about what he saw while he was tied to a tree. And they validated it that person seems very credible. So we're at the point where if he told that story to the FBI and the OSBI, why isn't that enough to move the ball on this investigation?
At least get a search warrant of the property. This is what we don't understand.
Right. Do you think that there is a motive? Maybe they saw something or were involved. Why do you think this happened?
The motive, I believe, is it's drugs. And Molly was 17 years old. Con was 21, and I believe Colt was 22, or vice versa, at the time. And Colt ran drugs, was selling drugs. So was Con. When Con picked Molly and Colt up the morning of the 7th, that Sunday morning, it was on the premises that, hey, Colt, you bring your drugs to my people, and I can help you double your money.
Girl, real talk. This whole it's new year, time to reinvent myself trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
And so they went... From everything we've been told, and this is multiple people and so many statements made. And, we did hire a private investigator who also, back in 2014, he did go around and take statements from people that they were running a lot of dope that day on that 7th, Colt and Con were. And I think somebody was done dirty. And that's how this all came to be. From what I've been told, Colt was the target and it was not Molly. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. If the eyewitness information is correct, Colt was killed pretty quickly after that morning. Molly was kept alive for a few days, and some terrible, terrible things done to her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But they could never. Molly was 17, and she was a very rambunctious little girl. She's probably saying, I'm going to tell. They couldn't let her just go. You know what I mean?
Right.
You said something in the beginning of when you were talking about the man who murdered your sister.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you knew this guy had a family. So it's in what I heard from you was you had some sort of compassion there for the family. And
I think it's more, honestly, again, I think it was more trying to put the puzzle pieces together to try to understand how did they go from point A to point B. I will be honest with you. I had a lot of anger towards Ridgway's family, and it had a lot to do with the whole sentencing thing when they'd said, this isn't the Gary we know. No apology, no nothing. And when you don't see somebody, there were a lot of really bad things happening because people thought that these were just throwaway people. They didn't care. And Dave Reichert had to actually fight to say, we're going to pick up this case and we're going to find these killers, because there were people that just wanted to let it go. I just, for the life of me, do not understand how people can be that way. I just don't get it. But
Right. Well, I think that's what's similar to what you dealt with. I think that's how they felt about Colt and Molly, that they were throwaways, their life did not matter. And actually on Thursday, OSBI agent did call me Thursday night before the podcast was being aired on Friday with the polygrapher on there. And I said that to him. I said, I feel like you don't even care. I feel like that you think that your agency feels like she is a little drug addict. She does not matter. We've got these other cases over here that take precedence over her. I said, so since she can't do it, I will. He also told me it wasn't my problem. This is not your problem because you're not her mother. So anyway,
well, so what? Wait a minute. Are her parents in the picture with this?
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Well, her mother, yes, her mother and father, her stepfather, yes, they're very much alive and well. But her mother called me. Her mother is just very introverted, and she has some issues of her own, and she couldn't handle it. She can't even listen to the podcast. It's just too much. She called me in July of 2013. And said, I need you here. I need you to help me. And I went. I've never lived there. Didn't know any of these people until this happened. And so I just mentally have never left. I just work every day.
So how are you connected? Are you family? Are you a friend? Or how do they know?
I'm Molly's cousin.
Oh, okay. So you're a cousin. Okay. So you are family.
Yes.
And I can't believe that, but what can I say? I've heard some things too at the state level, that again, it's like, what? Did you really just say that?
Yeah.
I having a tendency to kind of believe what you were talking about with the drugs being involved, that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they didn't want to leave a witness.
Yeah, I believe that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what the eyewitness said, amongst other things. And he described in great detail what was done to Molly and Colt and how their bodies were disposed of.
So are they saying at this point in time that they were both murdered and maybe dismembered and burned? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what our investigation is saying. I don't know what the OSBI is, according to them, based upon another police officer who's been looking into this. When he talks to them, they classify it as a missing persons case. That is not even a homicide.
Right.
Even after the eyewitness statement.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And the eyewitness statement, Jenny, is really graphic. I mean, what this man says he saw, you can't make up this stuff.
No. Well, that's just it. And that is one of those things where you can ask him a question 100 different ways. And if that answer doesn't change, I believe what you're saying, that there's a good chance that is exactly what happened.
Well, not only his testimony, but the testimony from someone who was on the inside, who was a key witness in Joe Russell's conviction for his misdemeanor that he got the slap on the wrist, pretty much told the same story.
To the grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
So two people.
Who's in charge there now? Sheriff-wise, is it somebody that's on the up and up?
There was a guy that took over. He just passed away, though, and he was the one who actually hired an outside police officer to reinvestigate the case, gentleman, but he recently just died a few months ago. So he was a white hat who wanted to solve this case, and then he brought in this officer, Jackie Bates, who did a great job uncovering a lot of stuff, and he was the one who actually filed the search warrant to get on that property so they can really look at it, which got denied by the DA's office.
The sheriff now, who's interim, we've reached out to him multiple times now. He won't even respond.
That's very interesting.
They won't talk to us, but we've heard what they say. We've heard what their rationale is. OSBI agent has called Paula numerous times to tell him what he thinks about the case, and it doesn't. Paula, you can speak to that more. I mean, because you had the conversation with him.
They feel like that there's been so much misinformation put out over the years by so many different people, whether it be rumors or tips or what. They've got more tips on this case than they've got probably on any other case they've ever had. Because we've got a social media page. We've got over 34,000 members on that page. And so we've got all these tips coming in. Because of all the tips that have come in over the years, it's almost like, they're just throwing up their hands because, no matter what, even if we find her, we're not going to get justice. We're not going to be able to put together a good case because there's so many problems with the case. because of all the misinformation that's been put out there. They literally have blamed me for part of that because I have this Facebook page. And my response to that was, if I hadn't had to do this, if people would have been doing their job, then we wouldn't have ever started this Facebook page.
Right.
We had to do what we had to do. We even had to hire a private investigator because we were getting nowhere. And my husband was terrified that I was about to be killed because I have no fear. And I'll walk up to the killer's door. I have no problem with that. It's like OSBI they've just made it because of the misinformation, because of the Facebook page, because most of everybody who's come forward is a drug addict and they have no credibility. It's like it's all being dismissed. And I've said before, it seems like there's tips that have come into the OSBI that somehow I have found out about because the OSBI don't share information. But I will find out about this information some other way, and I will go double check the tip to make sure it was done.
Right.
To just do a follow-up because I can't trust anybody at this point to know that they vetted it to the end. I even called a meeting 3 years ago with one of the counties there. It wasn't in Love County, it was Carter County. The Carter County Sheriff's Department and his detectives were there, and I had the OSBI agents there. And I had a checklist, and it's like, this is at the top of my priority list right here. We have got to search this, and we've got to search this, and we've got to do this, because until these things are done, we can't move on.
Right.
Months went by, and even Rob and Cindy, I think, when they came down and shot the Up and Vanished episode, we still at that point had not searched the lake, one of the lakes that was at the top of my priority list, and we even filmed out there. And it was the following month that we were able to get some people out there and do the search, and the Oklahoma Highway Patrol came out and did it because we kept hounding the sheriff of Love County because he used to work for the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, in the Marine Division. So can you please get these people out here? And finally he did. He did get some patrol officers out there, and they did search the lake. So we were able, I can't say 100% confident because I'm never 100% confident in anything, but I can say about 90% confident that we can mark it off the list.
Yeah. I mean, bottom line, Jenny, Paula has been, the only reason she started the Facebook page and why we got involved is because a proper investigation wasn't done in the beginning because the person who was supposed to be doing the investigation was a cousin to one of the potential suspects who didn't recuse himself originally from this because he should have recused himself right away. And he called off the chase that night, and he was controlling what was happening and giving them time to do things. They didn't go look for them because he started a rumor saying, oh, they ran off to Wichita Falls, Texas.
And he didn't get a statement from Con Nip, the person driving the car, until almost 3 weeks later.
That was something I was also going to say is the OSBI, Con was one driving the car. His name's James Con Nip. He goes by Con. On Thursday, when I spoke to the agent, I asked him, when's the last time you talked to Con? He says, I've never talked to Con. And I already knew the answer. I basically told him that was something that probably needed to be done. I'm not going to go into what was actually said on that call, but because it wasn't very nice, but on my part. But the main person, because the way I started out that question to him was, who was the last known person with Molly and Colt?
Right.
And he said, what? What do you mean? I was like, who was the last known person with them? He said he wouldn't answer. And I'm like, Con, when's the last time you talked to him? I've never talked to him. And then I said some words. And then he said he tried to get Joe Russell, who is the former sheriff. He said, I tried to get Joe Russell to facilitate a meeting with me and Con. He talked to John and Ann Nip, who was Con's grandparent. He could never get to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's roadblock after roadblock. And
trying to make you understand.
No, I get it.
Frustration.
Yep.
For something that seems so simple to me.
So I heard you guys say that this guy is there during the interim. When is the next election?
November.
Okay, so who do they have running?
That's the whole thing. In that county, I mean, I don't know. I think they probably have two people running, but that during that time of Joe's reign, they all run unopposed. I mean, I don't know who's going to be running for it this time. The current interim and maybe someone else. We don't know who's declared that yet. But it's probably not going to be someone proactive because everybody in that area just wants this to go away. They're at the point now, they're coming up on 10 years. They're running out the clock. One of the people names that were involved, that was mentioned, that was involved from the eyewitness, he passed away, and others have dispersed. Khan doesn't live in that area anymore. He moved up to Oklahoma City. So they're all kind of dispersing. And all these people, we checked all these people, these names out. They all have records. They have rap sheets for a lot of things. And so it's not like they're great citizens normally. And Khan in particular was the drugs that he was running. He was working with the sheriff, cooking drugs at the sheriff's house. So, there's a connection there. It's a pretty awful web.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the reason why he got the deal is because I think during his grand jury is that he had something on someone else above him, and that there's a house of cards that's going to come down if he goes down. And that's why he got the deal yet. And because he had multiple felonies charges and he was a law enforcement. How do you walk away from that unscathed?
Wow.
So
I guess go ahead,
there's
Paula.
a lot. Well, I was just going to say, so I would really like some direction from you as to, like I said, I've been to the AG's office. I've been to the FBI. I've done FOIA requests for everything that's ever been prosecuted in this case. Like Khan was charged with for a high-speed chase with the car Molly and Colt were in. That's the only thing he's been charged with where they're concerned. I have done all this. I've got books and books. I've got paperwork for days. I can only do so much.
Another question that's coming to mind. So they got dropped off in the woods. I remember reading that part. When they were trying to call anybody, did they say why they were dropped off? Why would he drop them off in the woods?
That's Khan's MO. Molly and Colt were not the first ones they did this to. One of the guys that was out looking for Molly and Colt that morning, they actually went to Khan's house, him and 3 other people. And Khan's response was, do you remember where we left the Mustang? This Mustang that they had stolen and went on a high-speed chase with. When he dumped that, he dumped the car, and this guy who knew the area better than Molly and Colt, he dumped him out there. This was just fun and games. That's all this was. I have a recording of Khan in prison talking to his dad, and his dad, Khan has 108 days or something to get out, and his dad's telling him, son, you're going to start playing video games or something like this, to get your adrenaline going or whatever, get your adrenaline out so you're not out there causing ruckus or whatever, So they're already trying to prepare him for when he gets out that he can't be going on high-speed chases with the cops anymore because it's landed him in prison. So he always knew, because of who he's related to, that nothing was going to happen. He left them out there, and then I believe he went back the next morning. And when you listen to the recording that we have of the eyewitness, it'll kind of describe what went on, but more so with Molly than with Colt, though.
Jenny, do you think going to the governor's office would help?
I'd have to know a little bit more about the governor and the AG.
Yeah.
Paula, what happened? Yeah, Paula, tell Jenny what happened when you went to the AG, because you've been there multiple times.
Well, I've been there. Yeah, I've been there multiple times, and it's always like, now listen, it's a new attorney general in Oklahoma than it was when I went. So, and I have not been since there's been a new attorney general there. So I just want to clarify that. But it was always like, we have a round table, there's multiple people in the room, and they listen intently, and you can never get them back on the phone, kind of thing. That's how it always felt. And one of the visits to the AG's office, I actually took the Oklahoma Highway Patrolman who actually investigated the police chase. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol, they're responsible for any wrecks in the state of Oklahoma, high-speed chases, this kind of thing, vehicular thing. They were never notified about this. And it was our family, some people in our family, who actually notified the Oklahoma Highway Patrol about this chase that happened. It happened in July, and our family notified them in September of 2013. And he showed up to a meeting because me and my cousin and my sister did go to Con Nip's house in September, Labor Day weekend, and confront him ourselves. The day after that, Molly's grandfather was called out there on the pretense that Con's grandfather wanted to talk to him. Molly's grandfather pulled up. They held him at gunpoint. He was met with guns. It was it's been very volatile. The whole situation's been very volatile. And it was the day after we went and we talked to Con. Anyway, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, they actually went with me because he could really put it in perspective, because there was 2 police chases. There was one after Molly and Colt went missing that kind of started again. And the Oklahoma Highway Patrol actually got him during that police chase. So he was charged at the same time by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol for 2 different police pursuits. He went to prison on those police pursuits. So I took him with me so he could kind of describe to them. They're listening to a victim's family. Maybe if they listen to someone in law enforcement, maybe it'll ring true to them more, so that I'm not just making the stuff up about these people. And I think that's where this podcast has just been amazing. A lot of the locals are now catching on to what we've had to deal with. The AG's office listened to it. And again, that was pretty much the end of that story. I mean, there was nothing after that. So to be quite honest, I've just gotten nowhere by going to the AG's office.
Okay. So, and in the meantime, you're keeping a journal of who you're talking to, what their response is. Have you sent a letter to the AG's office or to the governor asking for them to look into this? Do you have that in writing?
I probably do the AG's office. Now, when Governor Mary Fallon was in office, she actually told our supporters to quit calling. They would hang up on everybody that was calling in. We got no help out of the governor's office when she was in office, and then it's Governor Stitt now that's in office, and he is Native American, for what I've recently been told, and that it might be in our best interest to get a hold of him. So is that something that you think we should do, is get a hold of the governor's office?
Oh, I would. I absolutely would. And I'm hoping that, and again, I don't know what it's like there, but I can tell you here in Washington, my seatmate, Gina, she was getting death threats and stuff because she was taking on that legislation, and she didn't back down. We worked on it together. And over here, one of the things that I'm happy to see is that they've taken, and it almost is like a bloody hand going over the face, because whether they're male or female, when you have a lot of them disappearing like what's been happening, when people see that, they know what that means. They're starting to understand that this is a problem. And it is, when somebody sees that, they know it comes to their mind. But, I don't know the community that around there, if they would come together and do something as far as with this new governor. So the other one, she said quit calling, right? So you have another bite at the apple with this governor.
Right. Well, and I don't know. I don't live in Oklahoma any longer, so I don't know a lot about this governor. I've not kept up with him, but definitely, in my opinion,
they have to have a state representative that represents that area. So over here in Washington, we have 2 representatives and 1 senator. So I would try to find out in the area, did she live with her mom at the time? She was 17, yes. So I'm assuming she was living at home.
She was living at home. She had left about approximately a week prior. Her and her mother got into an argument and she left.
Oh, God.
So in the beginning, they considered this a runaway. And then she did not qualify for an Amber Alert. She did not meet the criteria. Her mother reported her missing the next morning after the police chase had happened and such. Yeah, she was living with her mom, basically. You could say she had run away. I think everybody knew where she was. She was with her friend, and I think they kind of knew where she was the whole time.
Right.
Yeah, she didn't leave the area. She was very close by. She was at friends' houses. She was partying, and that's how she got involved into this whole thing to begin with.
Right. So what I'm saying, though, is that area, somebody has to represent that area. You've got to have a state representative and a senator there, and they are 2 good opportunities possibly to work with the governor. Now, in my particular case, Governor Inslee doesn't have a lot of love lost for me because I will hold his feet to the fire, and I don't twice about doing it. And I think that with this other mass murder, them not letting him out, he knew that I was involved. He knew also that Dave Reichert, the former sheriff, was involved. So he
wisely decided with us. But I'm just saying that at this point in time, that's what I would do is I would check. Now, understand when you deal with a senator or a state representative, we cannot necessarily get involved in personal cases. Our position is one that we look at legislation. We look back at the case like what happened, what's working, what's not working. Do we need to eliminate a law? Do we need to make a new law so that it makes it easier for these cases to be investigated if there was a divide between working with tribal and state or federal? Those are some things that they absolutely can help with. If Molly is gone, you're unfortunately in that club with so many of us that don't want to be there, and that pain just never is going to go away. But you do also have an opportunity to make a difference in her name that, you could look at some changes being made in kind of in the same light that I am, that other families don't get these police that show up with death notifications. And the other question I would have would be, do they have any remains that are not identified?
Not to my knowledge.
We don't know.
Okay. That might be something else to look into.
Well, I'm in very close contact with Angela Burt, who is the medical examiner here.
Oh, good.
Or
Okay.
in the state of Oklahoma.
Mhm.
So Molly is in NamUs, and I've been to all those missing person days and events that they've had. And Angela is very aware, and I think, and Molly's DNA is on record at the ME's office.
Okay.
And
But
so
I
is
would be
Colt.
curious because I'm going to try to put this into context. So, we dealt with the Gary Ridgway thing for all this time, and they had bones sitting in paper bags, basically, paper boxes, not identified for years after they solved this case. And the only way that their families ended up getting those remains back is because there was money allocated for them to do the DNA testing on the bones, because now we have, I don't know, is it 23andMe or one of these other things where, might we get a pop-up of a family member or somebody that shows up. So I don't know if Oklahoma, where this is, if they're doing that or not, but I do know that it did make a difference here in solving cold cases.
I do know that the University of Texas is where they do a lot of the DNA testing for multiple states. And the funding was cut for that for a couple of years, I think it was. And it was just recent, the funding has been allocated for that again. And I do know that that's where Oklahoma, if I recall right, that's where that's where they would send things for DNA testing. I don't know if they're actually actively doing that at this moment.
Yeah, I think right now, based upon what we know, is that they only react to anything that Paula comes up with. Paula comes up with an eyewitness testimony, recorded. Just so you know, that person she spoke to also gave her what he said was the murder weapon. Gave him the gun.
He did.
So you have it?
No, well, no.
I had it.
Go ahead.
He took me in a shed and pulled a gun out of a backpack and tried to hand it to me, and I got some paper and wrapped it up. When I left there, I called Love County deputy who I trusted, and I told him what had just transpired. He knew about the whole eyewitness situation and all that, and he was even at the lake when we searched. He told me to get to his office immediately, and I asked the eyewitness, I said, is this gun stolen? And he told me it was. So I knew that I needed to get that to law enforcement. So I did take it to them. I asked several times after that what they did with the gun, and that I was told that it was sent to OSBI Crime Lab for DNA testing and that was standard procedure. Then I couldn't get any more answers. I contacted by Facebook the gentleman that had reported the gun stolen.
Yes.
And asked him if he would talk to me.
Yeah.
And so he did. And I asked him if he had reported a gun stolen. And he, in fact, had 2 of them. And then I asked him if he had ever received the guns back, and he said he got 1 of them back. And I asked him what it was, and he told me, and that's the gun that I recovered. And I asked him if he knew how it was recovered, and he had not even been told. And the gun was never sent to OSBI Crime Lab per him.
We also confirmed that with another officer that was working there at the time, who said that gun they just returned it back to the guy. They didn't send it for testing or anything.
Oh, man.
The very odd thing thing about that was today, a woman who has been helping me since literally a woman that I met through all of this who lives in the area who has helped me. She was going over some notes today. And that same man who reported that gun stolen, we had a tip back then from a woman telling us that this, I'm not going to say his name, had told her that he stole his stepdad's gun and it was involved in Molly's murder. Well, just so happens that kid's stepdad is the one who got his gun back.
Oh, okay.
There's quite a few linkages here. The thing is, as far as all these rumors that we're hearing about like that, it all comes back. The more we kind of look at it, comes back to the same story. The same story that we've heard from this eyewitness. The same names are continually being involved. There's like 3 or 4 people, and the same names keeping coming up. And so we're just kind of confused why they don't have enough circumstantial evidence to really focus on this case when they just keep on missing the beat. They're like a day late and dollar short on everything. And if it wasn't for Paula, this thing would have been, lack of a better term, dead and buried a long time ago. They would have just, because apparently in that area, there's quite a few unsolved murder cases in that area that are drug related for whatever reason, and it's not being pursued.
So, do you know how many cases?
That's a good question. We know like about a handful off the cuff.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps going, though. People keep sending us stuff and saying, this is connected. This might be connected. We think that the sheriff was involved with this murder. I mean, it just keeps going. It's kind of endless.
And OSBI, because there's no body, there's no remains. So they feel like, what are we going to do? We don't have a body. There are cases and homicide cases. You know, I have friends who are homicide detectives all over the country. And you can prosecute a case without a body. There's witnesses. There was a gun. There was this. There was that. They've never really kind of done the homework to get this thing over the goal line. Whereas Paul is the one carrying the ball and keeps on passing to them, and they keep on dropping it. For whatever reason. I mean, I appreciate that they have a big caseload and everything, and there's a lot of other homicides that are more pressing, but this one's not going away.
Right. Well, again, all of that information that you are collecting is good. I think that if there are other cases that are happening, murder cases that are considered drug-related, that kind of thing, where's the prosecuting attorney on this?
We don't know.
Yeah, there lies our problem with what we're dealing with here. The prosecuting attorney, that's one of our big problems there. And some of these cases were investigated by the OSBI, and it was a different agent at the time, but he was our agent in the beginning. I know this sounds way out there, but it is something that goes through my mind all the time. There was a fire in a creek bed near where the car was found in September of 2013, just a few months after Molly and Colt went missing. And we know that they were in a creek bed. They said they were in a creek bed on some of these calls that they made. That creek bed had been set on fire. I had gone to it. Long story short, when we discovered there was a hole in the creek bed that had been set on fire intentionally. It had charcoal briquettes in the bottom of it, and it essentially been on fire for weeks. I contacted the OSBI, and the agent, after a lot of things happened that day, he was called out of Oklahoma City to get down there and investigate it because I was going down there. And I told him I will sit down there until somebody shows up and decides to check this area. When I got there, now you got to understand I'm way out in the middle of nowhere by myself. When I drive into the property, probably a quarter mile into it, there sits the sheriff waiting on me. He was called by this OSBI agent. Well, the OSBI agent was in Oklahoma City on a certification. When he showed up, he was very angry with me. He made me leave, first of all. He told me to leave. This was his crime scene now. After some other things were said before that, but basically that's what was said. And then I went around the tree line and stayed there. He took a Mountain Dew can off the ground, cut it in half, and collected ashes out of that hole with a half cut open Mountain Dew can that he found on the ground in the creek bed. And then if you talk to the DA, you talk to the AG's office, you talk to the ME's office, nobody knows where these ashes went. Nobody. They disappeared. And that feels like, to me, such a mistake. This is the same location that the dog has hit on blood remains, human remains. Same location. Evidence was collected from it in a Mountain Dew can by the OSBI, and it's gone. Nobody knows where it's at. And it feels like they're going to have mud on their face when this is all said and done and the story actually comes out. Feels like, to me, they just don't want it solved for that reason. I may be totally off base. Logical to me. They really screwed something up that a lot of people are very passionate about.
Well, yeah, because the bottom line is if they do this type of thing like this, they get more emboldened, right? And you get more bad actors that step in because they're not worried about any sort of accountability at all. That, yeah, I can definitely see where things are going with this. Did you take any pictures of the can? Did you, when you handed them the gun, did you get any sort of a receipt for any of this?
I did not. Now, the pictures of he made me leave the area, but one of the deputies that was there, he kept telling them, she needs to stay. She needs to see what y'all are doing. And they refused. They would not let me stay. But that deputy did take pictures of everything. I do not have his pictures of that day, but he does have them.
Are you sure? Are you sure they didn't disappear?
I'm sure. Yeah, he's got them.
Okay, well, that's good. It corroborates when you have stuff like that, whether it's journaling, whether it's pictures, whether it's somebody else, any eyewitnesses that have happened, I sure hope that stuff's in writing. And it's always good to get copies of anything that you can, because it does turn out that it can be cases that are being solved 20, 30 years later. So first thing you do is never give up hope, ever. It may not necessarily be the outcome of her coming home, which is what you want, but you can't give up. One of the strongest weapons that you have is prayer every day. If you got prayer chains, people that go to church, prayer chains, yes, absolutely. Those are invaluable, and you never know what might happen. And maybe there is some sort of a symbol or something that you guys could come up with that people recognize when they see that, so that they remember her. And maybe there is somebody that's being quiet right now, because that does happen, that they're afraid for a while, and then maybe that person that was involved dies or something, I don't know, but they do sometimes end up coming forward. And I think that, again, they can say that they're drug addicts all they want. The information pans out, okay? That's what I'm getting at. It's just because they do drugs doesn't mean that they don't know what was going on around them, I guess.
Right.
Unless they were really on drugs. But you have people that take drugs that are not under the influence 24 hours a day.
Right.
So, and if you had somebody like that, surely they're not going to remember the details if they were so wasted that they can't recall things in detail. The fact that they could recall them in detail is something that I think is reasonable. Very definitely interesting. And I don't know how many of these other cases have happened, but what I do know is that there are families that are on the other side of these cases that deserve to have resolution. You will absolutely never hear the word closure come out of my mouth, ever.
Right.
I hate that word with a passion, because closure is for everybody else. Everybody else that doesn't live with the nightmares or the anniversaries, or they don't live with that. So resolution is what I say happens to crime victims if they've got loved ones missing, so that they can properly lay their loved ones to rest. That to me was the hardest part when Debbie was missing for 6 years, that you can't necessarily just pick up your life. Every time the phone rings, every time you hear somebody that sounds like them, or you see somebody that resembles them, your life stops and you're following that lead. I always will say it is resolution, it's answers, but it's for definitely not closure. If she is gone, the only other thing that I can say, and that's just from experience, is that when you get faced with something like that and you can't change it, you can't bring them back no matter how much you want to, there is a healing aspect of doing something, which is to me similar to what happens with other crimes, where you are just absolutely helpless and you're at other people's mercy. And that is one way that helps to put those pieces back together again, that in remembrance of them, that you are doing something to help stop this from happening to other families.
And Jenny, that's why we wanted you to talk to Paula, because of what you've been through and what Paula's been experiencing and all of the setbacks that she's been through and you've experienced and that you were able to overcome. So we wanted to kind of have the two of you speak to each other and start a dialogue and maybe figure out a way to move forward here for Paula on the state level and then into the national level. And I think that what you've told her today is great help and advice. And I think that we have to start brainstorming on what we're going to do next.
Right. It may not necessarily be a bad idea. And I'm going to tell you that our governor over here, Cave, the daughters that came to my office, it was the last day that I was in Olympia. It was sine die. And they met with me that night. It was pouring down rain. They were just so beside themselves. They didn't know what
to do. They were ready to give up, thinking that they just were not going to be treated fairly in this situation. They didn't think that they would make a difference, and I talked them out of it.
Right.
I said,
Of course.
no, you do need to be heard.
Of course.
And so we started getting together, brainstorming, coming up with things that we needed to do, contacting the governor's office. We were ready to go national with it.
And I think that's what our next step has to be. I do believe that that is the next step for us.
Just quickly tell you, though, that if you've got an election that's going on right now, like what's happening here in Washington, you have so much leverage right now with the sheriff, with the prosecutor if they're up. This is something that you guys need to get involved with as far as contacting radio, television. You've got to come up with your message out there. Somebody may hear something that strikes their memory. But the other thing that you're also working at is you want people in those seats that are going to do the right thing.
I just want to thank you very much for talking to us and kind of giving us some direction. And I am very sorry for what you've been through. I don't wish this upon my worst enemy. So I am very sorry for what you've been through.
All great information.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's great information. I'm so glad you guys got a chance to speak and meet two very, very strong, powerful women with a good cause. And I'm glad that we were able to do this. And we're just going to power on. We're here for Paula, and we'll take your words, Jenny, and we'll keep on trucking. Next time on Partners in True Crime.
The more I see and the more I read and the more I hear, I have to say this is the most screwed up case I have ever seen in my entire career.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
For any tips relating to the disappearance of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes, please contact 833-4-MOLLY and Colt, and they will be directed to the proper law enforcement agency.
All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.